Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to yet another new video, another movie review here. Now, if you're new here, my name is Sean. I do daily movie reviews here on YouTube, as well as the audio is streaming available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify in their full versions. Now, just a few quick things for housekeeping to get them out of the way. Like I said before, again, these reviews are fully available in their entirety on the YouTube channel, and as well as on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify for the audio only. Now, today's movie review, we're going to be doing one of the more bigger summer movies, summer blockbuster movies that came out on, I believe it was the date of release was June 27th of 2025. So again, a very early summer movie. Now, this movie is called F1, or F1 the movie, if you want to call it that, as far as like how it was named. Now, my early attachment to it was that I remember going to see some other movies around the April and May time frame of 2025 in theaters, and there was not too much promotion around this F1 movie. I didn't know anything about F1 as far as like the racing league or really at all of anything. I just saw a few previews for this movie in theaters from other movies and things like that back in the early springtime and early summer for May. And I am I am personally a pretty big fan of usually whatever Brad Pitt does. I haven't seen every movie he's ever done. Like I did, like there was like the one before this that he was in was a Bullet Train, and not because of him, but because the storyline didn't look super awesome to me. I never actually like really watched that movie all the way through. I kind of started off. I think it was on Netflix, and I just kind of gave up on it like 10 minutes in. So that's my own problem. But for whatever reason, just with F1, it looked good. I don't know. It was just one of those, or it looked great actually. So it was one of those movies where I saw the trailer for it in theaters, and I just kind of got. It was a weird thing because I got like a really weird like instant hype for it because I never really seen seemingly a racing movie done or filmed the way it was filmed. Now it's directed by Joseph Kosinski, and if you're unaware of who he is as a director, he's done a lot of overall really great movies overall, but he's known for a lot of the bigger blockbuster films. So his recent track record, at least, is Top Gun Maverick, which came out in 2022, which we all know that did extremely well. He did this movie F1. He did Oblivion with Tom Cruise back in the day. He's rumored apparently to be doing Top Gun 3 with Tom Cruise again. He did the original, or I should say the Tron Legacy back in 2010 as a director, and the list goes on and on. And a few of my favorite movies as well. He did Only the Brave back in 2017. So again, he's done a lot of really heavy, emotional, solid films that have really big, so to speak, big productions and movies that are really requiring a really massive, not like a set, but just a massive amount of of atmosphere to pull off correctly, which is kind of what I feel like the F1 movie is. So again, my personal background, if you want to call it that, with the F1 whole league is that or like the racing league, is that I know of NASCAR and I know of F1 only because of this movie, to be honest with you. So when I saw the trailer in the trailer for it in theaters or in some other movies I saw back in May, I think it was of this year, I thought it looked really really good. I was pretty much sold on it because of Brad Pitt being in it. It's just flat out right there. Because again, for me, Brad Pitt is one of those actors where pretty much no matter what he does, for the most part, I will watch it or go into it with a like I know it'll be good kind of mindset. Other actors supporting him in this movie, just for the record of it, is going to be Kerry Condon, and again, if I mispronounce it, my bad. But yeah, Kerry Condon, Damson Idris, Lewis Hamilton, Javier Bardem, and a few other ones as well, as far as the main cast rounding it out too. But again, the face of the movie is definitely Brad Pitt overall. Now, this movie had a runtime or has a screen runtime of 2 hours and 35 minutes, so it's definitely a blockbuster summertime movie. And again, I saw the trailer for it in the theater, I thought it looked great. And then when the actual time came to see the movie in theaters, I actually just YouTubed what the F1 Racing League is about, and what kind of struck me as bringing my interest to it more than just him and the movie itself and it looking good as a trailer is how really intense the F1 Racing League really is. I found not a review, but kind of like an explanatory YouTube video explaining what really F1 really is about, how big it is, in Europe as well, how massive it is in Europe, and how I feel like, from a story standpoint and and a production standpoint and a realism standpoint, it had to definitely bring it, because I feel like racing, or at least, or the way it seems from the outside, F1 racing, the league itself, is a very passionate fan base, where it's like, if you do it wrong or do it incorrectly or do it false to the nature of what the actual racing league is like, then it would fail as a movie. And not every director or story writer, as far as like all those things that go into making a movie of this size, would necessarily follow those roles, as far as like making it really true to the real reality of the movie. And I heard a bunch of, I don't say drama, but I heard a few things before the movie was released, where a lot of the racers in the actual league of that were involved with the movie, like, didn't want to be part of the actual movie for acting, which is fine. I understand that part. They're not actors, or they're there to race. They're not there to be part of a film. But that the league, like, did allow the movie production overall to come into the league itself from their last season or the previous season, and almost enter into the races as a realistic standpoint. So what that means, or what that means to me, is that they definitely gave the respect to the league itself. Like, they didn't make the movie outside of what it could have been done. Like, and what I mean by that is, basically, like, I know a lot of, or seemingly of quite a few of these, whenever there's a movie that's like based on like a real thing, like a real, not even like a racing league necessarily, but just whenever there's a movie that's really kind of based on a real thing like this, where it's a very, really, again, like a heavy sports, or a heavy fan favorite, that the movie production, or production itself, like, needs to be involved one on one, or very, very much together, like, like, hand in hand with whatever that they're trying to focus on or tell a story about. And if you don't do that, it can kind of come across as like disingenuous a lot of times. And the best example I can give of that would be, there was a movie series way back in the day, like 10, 15 years ago, that was called, it was a soccer movie, or a soccer series movie, that was called Goal. And the movie itself, like the first one itself, they put this, like, not to get too far off of what F1 is, but like, it's kind of related to that. But the movie Goal, again, it was about this kid who grew up in playing soccer in Mexico, or football in Mexico, and then he got into the tryouts, or like the training for the British, not Premier League, but just a British soccer team, or English soccer team. And then, like, and my point was that they didn't really, as far as like movie production that I saw in the research that they did, as far as a production standpoint for that movie, they didn't really like pursue the partnership at all with football of the English league that they were trying to get into. And so it kind of came across as like, as a very, not a hated on movie, but the movie itself, like, it did okay. Like, it was an okay release from what I read about it, and I've seen the movie, a few times in my life, and it did spawn actually two more sequels as well, so it did good enough to spawn sequels. But a lot of times you can kind of tell when these movies, and not just racing movies, but like any kind of sports movie, or any kind of as any kind of movie production that's trying to be as realistic as possible with the story that they're trying to tell, if it's involving a real thing like this, that if they don't necessarily go to the real, whether it's a league or whatever it is, or a team, and get kind of like really involved with them and partner up with them to make it look as real as possible, you can kind of tell that really clearly. And it also looks very, again, very kind of disingenuous to the movie sets, movie production, to not even try and maybe partner with whatever might be the story that they're trying to tell. So from that perspective, I think that F1 for the movie, they did a great job, because all of the racing footage in the movie that I've seen or read about, and again, I've seen the movie in theaters, but like, as far as like what I read about and saw for behind the scenes and the actual making of the movie, everything that they did was, again, directly partnership and involved with the league, to a point where, like, the league considered them to be a team on their own. That, I mean, they weren't competing, obviously, but they were allowed to do, from what I read, they were allowed to do, or to be involved with the actual races in the league. So they were just considered to be an extra team in the league, and that's a cool thing. I think that's very commendable and respectable as well. So I think that's a really rad thing that can be, that adds more dimensions to the movie itself. Now, as far as the actual racing goes, again, I think it's hard to, with the runtime of this of over 2.5 hours, I feel like it's a very, very hard or difficult sometimes task to successfully complete or to get done in a very, very entertaining way. To have a movie where it's entirely based off of storyline wise, based off of this one thing, which is racing in this case, and keeping it interesting, because a lot of times movies like this, when the story has maybe some kind of like down points or some weird kind of like middle parts of the story where it's kind of can come across as more of like a boring story part, where or the racing is all it focuses on. I feel like that can come across as not as entertaining as it could be, or where it's like almost like a just not as good of an idea as it could have been, like initially, as far as like the idea being turned into a movie overall. And the best example I can think of this would be there's a few sports movies out there where again they are where it's like the whole entire focus is the sport itself, and then the movie kind of like fluctuates between being really, really interesting and fun to watch and entertaining to being really just a generic sports movie. And with this, I think that they, as a production and as a storytelling and a script and all that kind of stuff, and however all that's involved together, I feel like they did a very, very good job of keeping the movie entertaining. Like it definitely keeps on moving, and there's enough story to tell in this movie overall to where you're never bored. Like because I remember sitting in the theater and being very curious about that point as well, of just being there and being like, okay, this is 2.5 hours. This is all about Formula One racing. It's Brad Pitt, and I knew nothing about the story overall besides what the trailer gave me. And all the trailer really gave you was like that it's a racing movie with Brad Pitt, and that's all you really get. So really the trailer did a good enough job of getting enough interest to obviously get the numbers it did to pull in for audience and making money out of the huge budget that it obviously did have. But then it was good enough to be over 2.5 hours long and keep everyone interested in the movie overall, because again it had some really, really solid box office numbers as well. And the funny thing about it too for me is that the because this movie was produced by Apple TV Plus. And if you know anything about Apple TV Plus for films, there's not much to say about them, because there's not much of a positive way to spin it, because overall, since Apple TV Plus as a production company has been making movies or films, since they've been starting just productions or having productions, they don't really have the best track record overall of releases as far as like making money, whether it's on just the Apple TV box top set that you can watch it on, and having it being streaming only, all the way to being a theatrical release like this was. They don't have a great track record of making any money or having the interest of people as far as like audience wise, like being like good enough for being just a good release, which is kind of crazy to think about, because a lot of the films that are released on Apple TV Plus as far as streaming only, there's a lot of really good stories that are being told and a lot of really great actors that are in these movies. But for whatever reason, I just have never really seen too much promotion for Apple TV Plus movies besides this one. And even this one was only like two trailers over the course of a few months in the theater, and that was about it. So there wasn't really even a ton of promotion like off of the internet, so to speak, of like in a movie theater for this movie. But it was still it had a really good solid theatrical release to go with it, which was just again a credit to the director, the story, F1 racing commitment from the fan base, and also just Brad Pitt being attached to it as well. And I think another thing that really added to the credibility of it as well is that Brad Pitt, again, all the racing that I've read about that happens in the F1 movie, all the racing was done in a realistic standpoint. So that, as far as I'm aware, and if I'm wrong, then tell me I'm wrong in the comments, or give me an update on it and that kind of thing too. But from everything I've read, is that Brad Pitt did all of his own racing, like he was really in the car racing, and it actually gave, I guess, the studio a little bit of heat and a little bit of concern because of how much he wanted to do or be involved with it more and more and more, and to have it be him, like him in the actual seat doing the racing, doing the driving, and that kind of thing. Because again, it's kind of like the Tom Cruise effect, where Tom Cruise is known for intentionally doing all of his own stunts, and it's hard to get all the the approval for that if they even do. So I feel like it was kind of like that like for this film for Brad Pitt, where it was like he wanted to rightfully do all of his own racing, and that was hard to push and a hard sell, even though it's racing and it's not safe no matter how you spin it. So I think that was interesting. He did get to do all of his own racing. I think that the story itself is good enough. Like for me as a moviegoer, when I saw it in theaters, I did not really, honestly, in a sense, care about what the story was because I didn't really know what the story was about in the first place because the trailer didn't really give you much. Like you knew his name as an actor, or you knew his name as a character in the movie for who Brad Pitt was, but that was about it. And so when you see the actual movie, like they do a decently just and this is for Joseph Kaczynski, the director, but he did a decent enough job of giving the story as a quick story, like as a quick like motivation for why this movie is even happening as far as like storyline wise. Because basically in the movie it's where like Brad Pitt is this kind of like this this over the hill so to speak for a racing standpoint of an age point where he is not on a team anymore. He bounces around between professional teams or not professional teams just to continue to be able to race whatever he can. He's not in a league at all, and he doesn't really do it for that reason anymore. And then Javier Bardem comes into his life from knowing him previously on a previous team when they were younger, and basically says like, hey, I need someone to replace my primary racer, or because I guess in F1 racing they tag team races with two drivers, not just one, so it's two drivers per team, and they kind of just like they both race at the same time, and whoever gets the best position basically like does gets points so to speak. It's kind of like that for from what I understand about the actual racing league itself, for how it gets scored and such and so on. So he recruits Brad Pitt to do that role, and then Brad Pitt is definitely seen as an outcast when he gets into the actual league and shows up to the league and starts to do the racing itself. But to me, what really kind of like was cool about the movie itself, like as far as the overall that I loved them, that kept me interested in it for the whole 2.5 hours, was pretty much it was partially the camera work. So not the directing, but just the camera work itself, because the almost all of the racing scenes in the movie were done in car or in the vehicle, so to speak. So they were all done for the most part in the vehicle. So and it was a cool camera that I read that for behind or that I saw behind the scenes film on, that they created a brand new camera that would flip back and forth, like had like a 180-degree swivel on it, where it basically would swivel from being in the front where you're viewing the driver point of view, and then it would flip 180 degrees back, so you were directly seeing the driver's face, and so in this case most of the time Brad Pitt, and it would constantly swivel appropriately based on what was happening in the story, and what kind of emotional effects, so to speak, that the director Joseph Kosinski wanted to have based on where the story was at. Because not every part of the movie for racing wise, for the actual racing part, is like is super event involved. Like I mean, they do show I mean the whole movie, which is why maybe it's so long. But the whole movie, like they go through every single race for the remainder of where they're at on the league terms, so to speak, of the time frame, the timeline of it. So I believe it was like 9 races that were left, and they showed all 9 races like overall, like at least a summary of each one, of like the laps that they went through and their experiences, and they how basically like Javier Bardem's character, like he was pretty much like the owner of the company, or owner of the racing company, and how if they didn't podium by the end of the league series, that the team itself would be kind of gone out of the league, so to speak. So it kind of gave you that kind of storyline overall, and that kind of kept it interesting too. But I feel like it was cool because like Brad Pitt, he's definitely known for, at least to me, he kind of has this like acting mentality of where by now in 2025 you kind of know who he is as an actor, and he kind of really doesn't really change that character that much between his movies. Like I mean he doesn't really even act as much as he used to, so to speak. Like, so he definitely has the ability and the options to choose to be a part of whatever movies he wants to, and then he can definitely obviously take his breaks between all the movies or his roles as often as he wants to as well. It's just how he is. It's just how big of an actor he is and how selective he can be. And I know that from reading about this movie, the making of it again, is that he was in training for this film for a couple of years to get it right, to make sure that he was as involved as possible. I think he actually helped produce it too, if I remember correctly from reading the actual credits on it as well. So he was definitely involved with it in many different aspects as far as like the storyline itself and how it was written, then producing it or helping produce it too, as far as just getting it made and all those things that are a lot of actors I feel like are becoming more and more involved with movies nowadays, and that on the behind the scenes aspects. If it's a story that they really want to tell in a more heavy in a more intelligent way, because I feel like a lot of movies these days are that are not so successful, and even if they have a bunch of like a big budget, or and I'll even put it this way, like a lot of Marvel movies or DC movies that have these like 200 $300 million budgets that either barely break even or they don't break even of what their budget is, and they're seen as a failed movie because their box office numbers for like at least opening weekend are not even like half of what their budget would be. I feel like F1 did have a big budget from what I read about it, but I feel like there's a lot of actors nowadays who are becoming again producers, and or they're becoming a lot more involved, like I said before, with the storyline, or the script itself, just because they feel like they can definitely add more to the story by being involved more. And so I feel like you can kind of tell, or I feel like you can kind of get a vibe for a movie, maybe even before it's even in production, so to speak, when you because these days I feel like with how transparent things are with film and with movies these days, for the most part, that when a possible movie is being or when a movie is possibly being produced or made, like from just like even like the initial seed of inspiration for it, whether it's a sequel or whatever it might be. I feel like when that's announced as news sometimes, and then you see who's involved with it as a director or writer, you can kind of almost tell in some ways right away, or really really quickly at least, after it's get some steam going, if it gets made, how good it can possibly be because of who's involved as an actor sometimes, or as who's a producer. And this kind of goes back to like how I felt about even like my last movie, which is a whole different genre, but for The Conjuring, for the last film, for the last rites, where again James Wan was a producer on it only. He didn't direct it, and they brought in the original or the previous director from the last movie that didn't get the best overall fanfare, didn't do so well at the box office. So again, and that kind of just goes along with it being maybe not so successful, because again, I feel like these days, from a production standpoint, when movies are announced that they're being made, or there's some sort of announced inspiration for a movie being possibly being made, and it gets announced by like whatever blog or whatever magazine online that there is, that all gets kind of plays into a movie's popularity. And I feel like with F1, the movie, as soon as it was announced, because I was tracking it lightly, sort of speak, I was tracking it very, very lightly, as far as like if it when it was being made, like from the very beginning, as far as like when Brad Pitt became involved with the project, and how he wanted to produce it, and how he wanted to become involved with the story and making the story maybe stronger in a lot of cases. Because a lot of times I feel like when I read about these movies being from the very beginning of when they're just projects and just a script, which isn't even possibly finished all the time, I feel like a lot of times that they will intentionally take the script and and bring it to like a friend of theirs that's a writer they've known for a long time, or that they've worked with in other projects that have been really solid and worked out very well with, and they'll give them the script, and then it'll be then reworked and improved again. So again, I feel like Brad Pitt has that kind of influence and that kind of power in his films. And I mean, the majority of, or I like a lot of Brad Pitt films lately, because again, there's not that many of them anymore, and he's very selective on how he chooses roles. I feel like a lot of his films are like, he's making it because it's going to be good. And even something as simple as an F1 racing movie, where it's part of this really popular European league that isn't maybe so popular in the US right now, at least in 2025. I feel like that gave it a lot more credibility, even just up front, just for being a popular thing in Europe, and that's probably why it did so well at the worldwide box office, because the actual US box office for F1 when it came out opening weekend wasn't super strong. It had a great Rotten Tomato score and an audience score, which are two very different things and very, very equally important. But I feel like it took a little bit of time, more time, for the actual movie of F1 racing to gain traction in the U.S., because the league itself is not so popular in the U.S. as it is in Europe. But what's crazy is that these days, in 2025, I feel like a big thing too is that that as soon as the movie comes out, like especially from like the initial even Thursday showings of it, like the not early screenings, but like the early Thursday showings of when the first ones that are out into the first weekend of release, I feel like it becomes very apparent and very obvious if a movie is good because people will be very blunt and rate movies online. It'll go very quickly. There'll be like it's pretty much almost like a wildfire in some cases where or a movie can be destroyed over a weekend, or it'll be kind of justified and kind of like sustained for how good it can be. And that's where the trailers kind of end up kind of like stopping their own on being worthy of anything because your trailer is going to get people in theaters. That's its job. But as far as like as far as like after that point, once the movie is opened and it's in theaters, then the ratings will come out and it'll be very quickly and very abruptly and sometimes bluntly obvious if a movie's good or not. And I definitely feel like with F1 the movie, it was definitely more of a slower tracked up box office for the U.S., but it did eventually gain traction. I remember in early June or in late June when it came out in the U.S. that it gained traction slowly in the U.S., but then it got more and more popularity, and people were calling it like the biggest, the big blockbuster of summer, and which it really was for that aspect too. So again, for story wise, I think it's a great a decent original story. It is something that's not like we've seen in a very long time. It's not a remake for once. It's not a repopularized film from the early 2000s, which is a popular thing right now, which with a lot of horror movies where a lot of studios are bringing really popular movies from back in the day and redoing them with a new cast and bringing back original cast. It wasn't that at all. It was an original storyline for racing of a league that's not super popular in the U.S., but it still is it's a worldwide league, which is cool, and it had Brad Pitt's face all over it, and just the overall the technology that in the direction that was being used in it was seemingly advanced and very for at the top of its game too, which is really cool to have that in the movie as well. And again, the story it was a good story. It wasn't great. It wasn't boring. It kept going, and again, the movie kept on moving along. And for me, that was probably one of my favorite things about the movie overall is that for it being 2.5 hours, like I did not. And that's something I'll mention too is that I a lot of times or sometimes if a movie is over 2 hours, I will sometimes feel like I've been in the theater for 2 hours. And when that happens, I'm not gonna say I get bored, but I can kind of like I can feel the hours kind of going on, and I feel like I'm almost like wasting my day if I feel the hours kind of tick by. If it's a movie that's that long with kind of no end in sight sometimes, and I don't mean that in a negative all the time, but you do feel the length of a movie, so to speak, if you're seeing like a longer movie in theaters. But with F1 the movie, I didn't feel that at all. And when I was watching it in the theater for the first time, I felt like it was very again very captivating, very energetic, very it pulled me in within the first 5 minutes, and there was enough humor in the movie to where it kept going, and it wasn't even like all about like hardcore racing of the F1 league. It was more about like this character and how he's dealing with his age, how he's dealing with a rookie driver, how he's dealing with a racing league, and how he's dealing with all that kind of coexisting around him. And you have all that storyline that's kind of like intersecting with the entire process of a league that you may not know about or not at all in my case, and it's kind of just the overall cool radness of watching them just doing these races and having these races be super intense at some points in the movie too. So, I'm not gonna rate. I don't want to rate movies on here, but I think it's a really solid movie. It is available now on Apple TV to either rent or buy as well. But again, this was a very definitely the first blockbuster summer movie for sure that was not a superhero movie, which is kind of extremely refreshing by itself. Just a solid racing movie that again was an original story and just a really good script with it too as well. Good directing, great acting overall, enough drama in there, enough action, enough humor to keep it going too. So again, that's my kind of overall feeling about F1 the movie. But in the comments below, give me all your thoughts on the F1 movie from this summertime. If you saw it in theaters, if you liked it, if you disliked it, anything like that, things that you would have changed maybe about it, maybe about the runtime or just anything like that, about the just Brad Pitt's his acting in there as far as all that goes as well. And then give me all your feelings and thoughts below in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys all in the next review.